you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, do so now. And if you are subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. It seems that practically every day more people are notifying me that they have been mysteriously unsubscribed without their knowledge. Also, hit the bell icon. That's supposedly how you're supposed to be notified when new videos are released. And of course, give the video a like. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, it's no secret that black people in the United States are oversampled when it comes to consumption of entertainment. This is because black people are attempting to escape from their circumstances. Entertainment serves the purpose of escapism, a temporary reprieve from the real world, and black people are forever looking for ways to hide from reality, which explains why white supremacy still stands and black empowerment does not yet exist. But how do you get people to dial themselves in for this kind of denial of reality for the long haul? How do you make it where the people decide to hide their head in the sand long term? Well, you got to come up with a lie, but not just any lie. It has to be a seductive lie. It has to be a sophisticated lie, a lie that largely seems to mirror the reality that people are in, albeit with an unrealistic twist to it. You want something that makes it where the person being lied to will go along with the lie. White supremacy is nothing if not sophisticated. You do not have a system like this that endures for half a millennium by being stupid. As a case study, in just the last 6 months alone, we have been subjected to not one but two grotesquely blatant in our face examples of the white media trying to rewrite black history. Cassie Lemons, who clearly is on some sort of anti-black male jihad, she's allowing herself to be used as a stalking horse for the propaganda arm of white supremacy. She's been the person, the front negress, behind not one but two pieces of anti-black propaganda. First, Harriet, which should be called Not Harriet, and then Self-Made Woman, which is doubly ironic when you consider that you got this so-called black female director who waits on Netflix to give her a check to write some garbage, and she calls it Self-Made Woman when she's not practicing any sort of self-made anything. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, the white media is out to control image. The reason for this is simple. I use a phrase called image training quite a bit. What is image training? It's based on a very simple principle. As human beings, we take in fully 80% or so of the data that our brains process in the form of images. We rarely listen to anything that's being said, and we almost never do any research through our other senses, including asking questions. We just take whatever we see at face value. So, since repetition is the mother of learning, and we learn mostly through what we see because we can't be bothered to utilize critical thinking, what happens is when you see a particular image or a particular trope over and over again, you're being programmed. Well, most of us anyway. And we have to be honest about that reality. Most of us, including a lot of you who are nodding your heads and going, that's right, them other Negroes over there, they're being programmed, not me. The black community would not be in the condition that it's in right now if most of us were not going for this okie doke. White supremacy has no problem allowing you to have plausible deniability of their brainwashing and indoctrination, because that's exactly how every long-term system of control is able to endure. The control has to be deniable. The ancient Romans understood that principle. A system that requires physical chains, that absolutely needs physical chains to be put on somebody in order to get them to toe the line and keep them subjugated, that's a system that can't stand because people can see the chains. They can see the person who put them on. They understand that they're under oppression. You have a system that denies that it's oppressive, that takes the chains off of you, and you have the chains woven into the social fabric itself and the political structure itself. Now what's happening is the person being oppressed gets to deny the oppression. And by doing so, they become collaborators in their own oppression. And this is where a sophisticated form of media comes into play. You require a form of media that is smart, a form of media that is going to be seductive in the way that it gets its lies across to its intended victim. You know the old saying about life imitates art. It's attributed to Oscar Wilde, and it is true, but that saying didn't come from nowhere. It was a direct critique on the power of mass media. But art is not some anomalous thing, and mass media is anything but random. Under white supremacy, all media is propaganda. All of it. I've taught you that both the so called entertainment and the so called news that you watch are actually made to complement one another. They're not made to be separated, they play off of each other. That's deliberate. By complement, I mean they're meant to work together. They mirror each other. They are both two halves of the exact same message. People are much more likely to watch something that's entertaining before they even consider watching something that's allegedly informative or educational. So the white media for centuries has used its entertainment as the primary vehicle to teach its anti black racism. White media teaches societal roles, the principal societal role being a racial hierarchy that must be adhered to. TV shows and dramas and cartoons and comedy specials, they indoctrinate the society that black people are criminals or buffoons, or at the very best, the best that a black person can be is the best friend to some white person. In other words, a two legged hound dog. And the white news shows justify this racial hierarchy by starting off with a black suspect leading the news. The crime blotter always starts off with a black person. Even if they're reporting on some black person who they reported on for the last 2 or 3 days, they'll go ahead and rerun that. Even if they have to report on some black person outside the city or even outside the state, they'll go ahead and do that. But as long as they maintain that absolute requisite, that's how you know that a program is at work here. It's not a matter of we're leading off with the latest crime. It's a matter of here's your reminder of who the black man is supposed to be. This is who the bad guys are. That's deliberate. Sure, there are a number of black people who send press releases to the white media and who otherwise are engaged in all manner of constructive and meritorious behavior for their own benefit, but the white media is not showing that. And the reason why is this is image training. They're also trying to indoctrinate the black community to understand if you're doing anything that's good, that's not going to be covered. Nobody's going to be broadcasting that. If you're doing something bad, that's what's going to lead the news. So if you're a black person, what possible hope do you have to get the media megaphone of white supremacy to at least stop it with the blatant anti black racist programming? Well, the white media goes ahead and gives you an out on that one. They go ahead and make their blatant racism deniable because they'll give a pat on the head to a black person for being a good athlete, so long as there's a white coach or a white sports franchise that your athletic prowess is benefiting, or for being useful to white supremacist institutions. They can do some insincere puff piece about some black politician or government appointee, or perhaps some Negro at a university, because this reinforces that black people should aspire to prop up the trappings and institutions of white power. And it's not as if the white power who owns the media doesn't know all this. You think all those PhDs, think tanks, and all those people who have spent decades running the media do not understand exactly what the power of all of this repetitive imagery is? Hell, they write books about it. That's the reason why whenever you have these movies that are about the depression or what have you, it better be a gangster movie about a white man who's running around robbing people and taking what he wants. You better not be showing white people down and out. The dominant society makes it very clear that's the kind of imagery they're not interested in seeing, and they rebel against that. You're not going to be showing images of white people as just these hapless victims. You're not going to be showing white people as victims of circumstance or white people at the bottom of the barrel and there's nothing they can do. It's like, nah, you better not be trying to reinforce that. The appeal of the material the white media puts out isn't by accident. It's not incidental. It's calculated. They spend hundreds of millions per year to make it so. They use psychologists, sociologists, and all manner of academic experts to help them craft the TV shows and movies that you watch to push certain psychological buttons. If you watch cartoons in particular, if you look at the credits, you'll see that on some of those cartoons, if not a few of them, you'll see there's some people with PhDs in their names who contributed to the making of those cartoons. They gear their material to appeal to us on the surface and subliminal levels. They deliberately structure the TV shows that they present to us in such a way that's meant to bypass our skepticism and critical thinking. That's why they use sex and special effects and other distractions. That's just a way for them to candy coat the poison. You're so busy paying attention to the whiz bang CGI, or you're paying attention to some actor's bare bottom or some full frontal nudity, or you're watching some pyrotechnic explosions going off, and you're really not paying that much attention to what it is they're getting across. Sure, they're going ahead and getting their message across, but before you start dwelling on it too much, here comes the next action set piece. Oh, look at all the fancy camera movement. We've got 3D robots and aliens and such. Yeah, and you also got an image of Captain America in Wakanda. Here he is in a black man's kingdom, and you got a white boy out front. Just thought I'd say so because you damn sure ain't going to be seeing Black Panther in a Captain America movie front and center. And I'd say this is somebody who hasn't even watched this. I just watched the promotional material for it. And it's blatantly obvious that there's something wrong with it. But again, a lot of black folks will happily plunk down their $12 to see this stuff. But as far as they're concerned, it's going to be an entertaining 2 hours. Yeah, entertaining and indoctrinating. Now, as far as the psychological buttons, the subliminal buttons that the white media pushes when it comes to their entertainment, consider this. Most of the TV shows that you watch happen to be built along the structure of a family. You usually have a lead character who's going to be the stern father type figure, and then you've got a secondary character to him who is his subordinate, who basically says go easy on the kids, and then you got the rest of the supporting cast who are basically the children, if you will. The example that comes most readily to mind, but I'm sure that a lot of you, based on whatever your favorite TV show is, can think of it. Say Star Trek. Star Trek's one that we all should be familiar with. If you had the Next Generation, you had Picard, he was the stern father-like figure, and then you had Riker, who was the fun-loving subordinate, who was basically telling Picard, "Chill out, we're out here in space to have a good time." Basically, that the point is like the mother on the show. See, even if you don't have a female as the secondary in command, even if it's not based on gender, it's based on what you respond to. That's the reason why with Voyager, you had a woman who was the captain of the ship, and you had a Hispanic who was her second in command, and yet what you had was Janeway was the strict father figure, and you had Chakotay who was saying, "You ought to go easy on the kids." They understand exactly the structure that they're using. And by the way, that's not the only one. There's a number of structures, a number of templates that the white media uses to fashion their work in order to bypass your subliminals and make it where you're accepting it. It's resonating with you and you're not even sure why. Another one that comes to mind is the TV show True Blood. That was not based on the structure of a family, it was based on the structure of high school. You got the young girl who's basically the freshman in high school. You got the mean girls. You got her black best friend. You got the love interest who's basically the star jock who doesn't have eyes for anyone except for her. You have the sheriff who is basically the school principal. He's stern but fair. That kind of thing. There's a number of templates that the white media uses as a means of getting a show to resonate with you. And here you are taking it in, and you're wondering why it is that it has such appeal with you. They pay very highly to make sure that their shows do that. As I've always taught you, the white media, the men who run the white media, they don't see themselves as being in the business of entertainment. They see themselves as being in the business of mind control. And when you look at how it is that black people who ought to be the main ones who are keeping that idiot box off, black folks are the main ones who oversample when it comes to watching TV. Oversampling means that we are disproportionately represented when it comes to TV viewership. So we're the main ones sitting here being TV heads and then wondering where all of this manic, out of control dysfunction comes from. When you look into the abyss does indeed look into you. And while the public, particularly the black community, bears responsibility for choosing to watch and to base their lives on these media lies, it's not entirely fair to say that they should bear all the blame. They didn't make up these lies in the first place. They did not come up with a media structure meant to push these lies on the public. White supremacy did that. The white media, the propaganda arm of white supremacy, did that. The TV programs and reality shows and all the other visual detritus the white media pumps out doesn't reflect what the public actually wants to see. The public didn't invent reality TV shows. The white media did. The public has no control over what the white media decides to present to them, so why does the public watch these shows to begin with? Entertainment plays on a natural human drive. It serves a mental need to downshift our brains for a given period of time. Now, if the entertainment is edifying and honors us and encourages us to pursue our empowerment, then it's good. It is worthy. But if the entertainment indoctrinates us to behave in ways that are detrimental to our interests, if it brainwashes us with a false, dangerous view of ourselves to pursue personal and group destruction, then it's not entertainment. It is blasphemous. And that being the case, you must identify it for what it is. It is wrong and must be abandoned. Black people have to understand that because of the fact that so many of us have decided to make a lifestyle out of ingesting and consuming the very anti-black propaganda that our enemies have built, even if you try to make so-called entertainment that's meant to be in your own best interest, you have to be careful that you're not repeating the very lies that you yourself have been indoctrinated with. I don't care how good the production values of a show are. I don't care if a black person allegedly directed it. Every director works for whatever producer hired them. I don't care how well written it is or how good the acting is supposed to be. These elements are used to entice people to watch. It's a formula. The white media understands the rudiments of formulaic entertainment. There have to be so many minutes of explosions, so many minutes of palace intrigue, so many minutes of bare boobs and butts, so many minutes of CGI, so many minutes of violence. It's done to a formula. But it should never be forgotten that no less than Dr. John Henrik Clarke warned us, these shows are out there because someone wants them to be out there. One in particular that comes to mind is HBO's The Wire. Now, The Wire, regardless of what you may think about the acting or the subject matter or the idea that black people are then as now so starved to just see a show that's got some black faces out front, and white supremacy plays on that. They make it where any and all depictions of black people are either going to be completely and thoroughly outrageously racist, or you're not going to be seeing anything at all, to the point where you basically will accept whatever garbage they put in front of you, and that's exactly what happened. But The Wire was never a ratings blockbuster. In fact, it always did poorly in the ratings. So why did HBO keep it around for 5 years? Because the honchos at HBO personally liked it. David Simon himself said that. This is a show that did real psychological violence to the image of black people, particularly black children, showing depictions of black children dealing drugs. And then you wonder why it is that Freddie Gray gets murdered, and for some strange reason, the white media feels like they've got entree to go after his mother. You see how entertainment basically works hand in hand with the so-called white news. And David Simon himself used to work for a white newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, I believe. No, these are not coincidences at all. And since black people didn't dream up these shows, didn't make them, didn't write them, and don't broadcast them, that means that white supremacy did. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, if the only thing you present a man with is dirty water, he'll drink it if he's thirsty. Well, unfortunately, because of the fact that black people's image has largely had a war waged on it, not merely a war to denigrate that image, but also a war to make it where black people are seen as seldom as possible, we got a whole bunch of thirsty black folks out there. We need to be honest. When it comes to entertainment, some of us are absolutely parched. We will slurp up any old crap that white supremacy puts in front of us. Now, sure, people watch this garbage because as a group, people are prone to foolish behavior. That explains why they watch it, but it doesn't explain why this crap was put in front of them in the first place. Well, as the great television writer David Milch said, writers say all the time, that's what we're selling because that's what the people are buying. But the truth is, Milch said, that's what the people are buying because that's what we're selling. And he was absolutely right. Before we go on, I'm not excusing black people from using their brains. We know we're under oppression, though some of us, most of us, seem to be in denial about it. We complain about media all the time, yet practically few of us have actually stopped watching what we know to be mind rot put in front of us by our enemies. And of those who watch, none of us think about what it is that we're watching. As far as we're concerned, if it's entertainment, that means to turn your brain off. After all, isn't that the entire point of entertainment? No. The point of entertainment is to have a sustained, calculated slowdown. It's not to turn your brain off. The brain is always supposed to be on. You're not supposed to have an off switch, though some black folks seem to have found or invented one. Worse than that, they believe the lies that the white media puts in front of them, and they even try to live their lives by it. I'm not letting any black people off the hook for playing the fool to white media, but I'm also not letting the white supremacist media off the hook either. They have spent centuries refining their methods of social engineering and brainwashing. They literally have gotten it down to a science, and they know it. Make sure that black people are shown as criminals and thugs and ne'er do wells. And if they're not, well, make sure that it's clear this guy is the white person's sidekick. Make sure he's in the background of whatever image you have, and make sure that there's not many of them. We don't want too many images of black folks, or they might start getting a little uppity. We want to make it where basically we don't show them at all, and it's clearly obvious to the viewer. We don't want black folks being seen unless we just feel like we have no other choice. Now, when you do that, what will happen is inevitably why you won't have to make any excuses for these denigrating images of black people. You won't have to make any excuses or explain away why it is that you marginalize black people, even in what's supposed to be entertainment. Black people themselves, so desirous and desperate to see an image of themselves that's something other than a thug, criminal, etc., they'll make up the excuses for you. They will offer lies for you. They'll cover for the white media. And that's exactly what's happened. You have black people justifying the white media's lies and indoctrination. And there's a reason for that. People have to be taught to be dysfunctional. People have to be taught to fight against their own best interests. This is the purpose the white media's so-called entertainment serves. It's poison in a candy coating. And somehow a lot of us have developed an appetite for this crap. Have you not noticed that even black people on their own, just out and about, if they've got their cell phone camera or any camera at all, and they do a video with themselves in it, they inevitably lapse into some sort of urban hip hop patois where you think they're about to go into a rap video or something. And the reason for that is they've been indoctrinated that when a black person's on camera, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go into your performance. And the performance is whatever the white media has put in front of you the most frequently, which is usually some sort of rapper, singer, athlete, etc. This is how you program a people to stop thinking and acting for themselves. This is the worst kind of dysfunction. Human beings are creatures of habit. We are what we do. If we do nothing, then we are nothing. And if we do self-destructive behavior, we destroy ourselves. Understand, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So when people are made to do things that are against their interests, say they are made to serve their oppressors for an extended period of time, they have their natural order broken down and they are completely scrambled up and screwed up and rearranged along the lines that make it where their entire existence is devoted to being useful to other people, especially those who hate them. What's going to happen is proper habits of self preservation and self empowerment are going to be undermined and destroyed. And even after these people walk off the plantations, even without massa standing over them to directly enforce the dysfunction, a number of them will still continue in these self destructive ways. You're not going to be able to talk these guys out of it. And when you have a sophisticated propaganda organ like the white media that is glamorizing, propping up, and promoting these very ideas to people in the form of imagery, well, what you have is a self reinforcing mechanism. Well, I don't have the patience or the luxury of reforming anyone who has volunteered to be a lost cause. And that brings me to black children. Black children need to be taught what is in their interests. The white media is certainly not going to do that. The black misleadership class isn't going to do that. These actors, athletes, rappers, and entertainers that so many of you oversample with your viewing of them, they're not going to teach you to do that. The home is supposed to be the primary classroom of the child. And what's being taught in the black home? Well, what's being taught in the black home is leave the children to their own devices. That means they're going to be open prey for the white media's indoctrination. First of all, every black child must be taught that as black people, they have interests, and that these interests must be protected because they live in a world that has organized itself to attack them. They live in a world that has put in place a structure meant to grind them into the dust. That they have interests that are separate and distinct and unique from the dominant society that they happen to live under. They need to be taught that. Your interests are not the same as the white supremacists. Your interests are not the same as the dominant society. They must be taught the reality that they live under oppression and that this oppression must be ended. The world happens to be twisted and perverted by white supremacy. They have a right and a duty to set things to rights. The current system of white supremacy is evil and must be crushed. It cannot be fixed, it cannot be reformed, it cannot be improved, and it damn sure can't be compromised with. Every black child is supposed to be taught that. I posted on Twitter yesterday that there are three things, and clearly there's more than three, but there are three things that black people are supposed to be teaching black children that they apparently can't be bothered to teach. First of all, black children need to be taught, as soon as this child can understand your words, it needs to be taught, you have no friends. So you better learn to rely on family. Second, as a black child, you have a right to power, and you have a right to do whatever is necessary to acquire it. And third, you should desire to see black people wielding power, but you have to have rules that go along with power. And rule number one is power is meant to benefit the black collective. And if you got some black folks who are off code, power is used to get them in line. And if they refuse to be gotten in line, then power is used to make sure that they are not a problem for the black collective. Power is useless if you're sitting on your hands while you got all this off-code behavior going on. You want to know why a lot of this crap's going on? You want to know why you got a Cassie Lemons and a Lee Daniels, and you got the rest of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools running around trying to undermine us at every turn? It's because of Van Jones or the rest, or a Stacey Dash, or the rest of these idiots. They know, or at least in the case of Stacey Dash, they thought that they could continue to act against black people's best interests and still be able to eat the next morning. They figured that there was no substantive black structure in place that could hold them accountable for acting against our interests. So the black bootlick, he acts the exact same as the rest of these anti-black racist groups. And it's because, as far as they're concerned, there is no price to be paid because there is not a substantive structure that black people have put in place to charge a price. Black children need to understand they are going to require power. And once they get their hands on some power, a lot of these attacks are going to start getting blunted because, as I've always taught you, power is used as a shield long before it's used as a sword. But black children need to be taught that there are things that they need to be protected against. The white media tries to teach some sort of dual propaganda. Well, we'll teach black children that the police are their friends. Yeah, but the police are not gunning down black children in the parks, and you don't have any of these white supremacists calling the police on white children in the park for the sake of getting them killed. You talk about that white woman in Idaho or Iowa or wherever. She decided that she was going to go to the park and violate the social distancing rules. You had the cops who had lined off the park with yellow tape to make it very clear, no, you're not supposed to be in here, not supposed to be using the playground equipment. We're staying off of the areas of common Congress. And what does this white woman do? She goes, heck with that. That's for everybody else. It's not for me. And by the way, she was a plant. As I told you, she was a plant. This was all a political stunt. So what happened was the police came and they arrested her. Yeah, but they didn't run around shooting her kids. There were multiple complaints about this woman, multiple complaints to the police. But they understood, well, we only shoot black children. And you'll have black children think the cops are their friends. You'll have the white media putting out images of black children whose parents are silly enough to let them run around. Oh, I like to shake hands with the police, and oh, we're going to make nice with the cops, as if we're a bunch of white kids from the suburbs. Understanding the police do not treat black children the way that they treat white kids from the suburbs. If you want to ensure that somebody never challenges a system of oppression, indoctrinate that child with the idea that the oppressor is their friend. You do that, and they will never ever rise up against the system of oppression. So, black children need to be taught that the white media's primary job is to get them to sit on their hands and allow the system of white supremacy to continue apace and to not get in the way of it. And, well, you're a part of this system of white supremacy. I mean, the American social order. Oh, it's not perfect, but it is improved. Oh, it's better than it's been in the past. You need to be teaching these kids, no, it's not better than it's been in the past, and you're not part of this. The only integration that matters is the integration of power, and you do not have any power, and the white media's job is to get you to think that you do. Or rather, to get you not to act against the fact that you don't. Okay, you don't have any power, but you better not do anything about it. You can just sit back and see if these misleaders and puppets and pawns in government are going to be doing anything about that power situation. Meanwhile, you get to watch as the people from the dominant society, they're being catered to hand and foot. The destruction of white supremacy is going to be a multi-generational struggle. So we as a people require a multi-generational approach. That's where the children come in. Their mother's milk of black empowerment is supposed to be fed to them daily. They are supposed to have a healthy sense of contempt for the system of white supremacy that they live under. They are to understand that there are a number of people, a lot of people who are beneficiaries of black subjugation and oppression, and that is not okay. They are to understand that there are people who are benefiting from black people's pain and suffering, and that these beneficiaries of white supremacy, they are not your friend. Black children need to be taught that their skin happens to be not a curse at all. It is empowerment. It has inherent value in and of itself. That you do not need to get approval or the approbation or the friendship of anyone else. Power is not about friendship. I've always taught you friendship stops at the cash register. You want people to like you, just go ahead and say yes to anything. Let them walk all over you, say yes to that, agree to anything that they tell you, and everybody will like you. But the problem is, what will also happen is you'll be abused, subjugated, done wrong with impunity. No, you don't want people to like you. You want people to respect you. If you want people to respect you, you better start saying no. That's something that the white media is not going to teach black children. So black children need psychological armor that is meant to protect them against the lies, that the insidious lies that the white media is going to try to indoctrinate them with. They're going to require psychological armor. And that armor is you teach them first and foremost. That dark skin that you wear, that happens to be valuable. There is something unique about it. The world's going to tell you that it's valueless, and that's the reason why is because they can't have it. Dr. Claude Anderson has said many times that we are an exceptional people. And that wasn't merely something he said as a means of helping us affect political policy. When he said that, that didn't just begin and end with the issue of reparations. That wasn't just a matter of undergirding a reparations claim. When he said that we are an exceptional people, he was giving us a basic truth. We are not part of some amalgamated post-racial human herd. We are certainly not like the white supremacists or their allies, and we don't want to be. It's suicidal to teach color blindness to black children when color is the very thing white supremacy is instituted to define its evil control of the world. White supremacy has used military control to put in place a racial hierarchy. And that hierarchy is based on color, it isn't based on class. So when you send black children out into the world and tell them, oh, don't see color, problem is that's the only thing the social order sees. When it deals with black people, especially black children, your skin color is the first and only thing that matters. And that will not change until you change it. Black children need to understand that the world has been turned on its freaking head. It's not just a little wrong, it is completely and thoroughly wrong. It has been perverted beyond all recognition. And it is their mission to set it to rights, that they are in this world for a purpose. And that purpose is to reestablish the rule of justice. Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, we as black people must step into the power arena of the world and start to deal. But before we call ourselves vying for power, we had better get it straight who that power is meant to benefit. The reason that Africa keeps handing its resources, its land, and its fate over to one group of foreign invaders after the next is because long, long ago, the African abandoned the idea that power is meant to benefit black people. The Africans abandoned that principle a long time ago. Part of this complete failure happens to be a historical bad habit that invaders and colonizers have been able to take ready advantage of. The African long ago decided that he would be only too willing to prioritize the well-being of strangers without first establishing to that stranger that he is merely a guest in the African's home, and that the guest's welcome can be rescinded at any moment. To let the stranger know you're here as a guest, but don't think you're going to be running anything. Make that very clear, and don't be bashful about it. You came here because apparently either you ran out of food somewhere else or you didn't have anywhere else to go. And that being the case, you're not going to become a problem here. Only thing you should be looking for is whether or not you got something to eat tomorrow. You're not going to be running anything. You're not going to be administrating anything, and do not ask for anything. You came to our home. We didn't come to yours. And from the looks of things, wouldn't have found anything even if we had. The African has a right to rule the places where he lives. That is what Malcolm X defined as black nationalism. Control of the economics and the politics of the areas in which we live. That's what Malcolm said 50 years ago. He gave the most succinct and appropriate definition of black nationalism that's ever existed. You want to know what the black agenda is? That's what the hell it is. To control the economics and the politics of the areas in which we live. What are economics? Economics is the system by which resources are distributed. That means we control the resources, starting with the land and the means of production. That means the factories, the places where things get produced. When you take raw materials and turn them into finished goods, that's how you create wealth. You literally create wealth like that. That's how it's done. Malcolm said it. All wealth is based on land. But you also got to control the means of production. And secondly, politics. Politics means the distribution of power in a given setting. Now, when you start thinking along those lines, that I am supposed to control the resources where I live so that I can eat the next day, and I'm also supposed to control the politics so that the resources are put to work for my benefit, then what happens is you're going to start getting bolder about a whole lot of things when you have that kind of mentality. I'm supposed to be bossing up in here. I'm supposed to be calling the shots. And the shots are not just I'm running around trying to be the big man on campus. It's supposed to be a matter of there's a specific destiny that I am pursuing. I require resources and the control of those resources in order to do so. And I will have my power. That starts with where you stand. Africa has become just a pitiful case study in how you abandon your duty to rule and you'll wind up being ruled over and eventually wind up being stamped out of existence. The African has failed time and again to require anything from those who have set their feet on African soil. And as a result, the Africans have become ready prey for anyone who washes up on their shores. The African has forgotten, well, at this point, he's become contemptuous of the idea of being empowered. Apparently, he thinks power is something that other people are supposed to wield, but not him. And then he wonders why it is that he's been the victim of everybody else's whim and caprice. At best, you got a few of them who apparently their highest aspiration is to play golf with their European colonizers or to try to be best pals with the racists coming in from China, no matter how many countless examples of blatant anti-black racism the Chinese are carrying out. This type of dysfunction is not merely the result of being miseducated by the white media. Is also a failure on the part of black people. A child's primary education is supposed to take place in the home. Yes, ordinarily the institutions of the society would be the ones responsible for teaching and reinforcing a value system that instructs the young as to their place in the world and how to preserve it. The thing is, we live under white supremacy. And that being the case, we do not have institutions because we have not made it our priority to establish them. Now, you've had many black bootlicks who have been paid agents of the oppressor class who have come among us and said, we don't need any institutions. Why? We need to integrate into white supremacy's institutions. You know, the main institution that black people have been integrated into were the plantations and Massa's big house. Oh, we were fully integrated then. And abused morning, noon, and night. Men, women, and children weren't free, couldn't have a moment's peace. But apparently there are some people who apparently long for those days. Do you? So lacking the formal institutions in the greater society itself, because of the fact that we have not built them, you start in the home, you start where you stand. And this is something that black people, apparently, too many of us are desperate that we're going to try to get out of doing. We're going to try to find a way to make excuses and talk our way out of doing the hard work of establishing our institutions and defending them. You want to know why it is that black folks are terrified at the prospect of having to actually build something and then defend it? It's because they're still, at this late date, trying to be friends with the white supremacists at this late date. When you start talking about you got to defend what's yours, like, well, yeah, but what about these white supremacists that I'm trying to be friends with? Hey, I saw some Becky over there. She's got the clap, but I hear that she ought to be over it in a few weeks, and I'm hoping that maybe I can get some interracial sexual access. What? I'm supposed to be over here with just black people? That ain't good enough for me. There are a lot of black folks who are absolutely captured by that mentality. So when you start talking about protecting what black people have, only thing that they hear is ain't going to be no more interracial sexual access and no more of being some white supremacist pet Negro. That's all they hear. So, of course, that doesn't appeal to them. This is what we are attempting to put in place. That's why I said over a decade ago, what is the goal of the black media? It is to take control of the social discourse within the black community. Social discourse means the culture, because a culture is supposed to honor and magnify the importance of those who are part of it, to instill in them a sense of value and purpose, and that wherever you go in this world, you should be respected. No one can claim that the sons and daughters of Africa have ever set their foot on foreign soil and then attempted to undermine, colonize, overthrow, enslave, rob, or marginalize those whose lands we've entered. On the contrary, we have only built them up and benefited them. We brought them things they didn't have and could never have made on their own. We have not tried to force anyone to speak our language or to adopt our ways. But these other groups who we've come among, not only have they decided that they would copy our ways, but a lot of them who never even met us, they imitated us and claimed that they had met us. They have imitated our ways of their own free will. And I think that's a large part of what it is that they resent about us. The only way that these white supremacists and other groups were able to get others to adopt their ways was by the sword or the gun. The African, on the other hand, was able to conquer these other people's cultures and supersede their cultures without firing a single shot, simply by virtue of the fact that we were there. That's the origin of this idea that they hate us because they ain't us. They're looking and going, man, how come we don't have that kind of appeal? And so what they instinctively do is, since they see something that they don't have and are incapable of actually getting, it's a matter of, well, we're going to say if there's something wrong with you, all the while they're imitating us morning, noon, and night. They imitate the trappings of black culture morning, noon, and night, but they say that there's something wrong with us. Well, perhaps there is, to the extent that we are not making our children aware of the world that they live in and properly preparing them for it. We don't prepare them physically. We do not prepare them with material resources, and we dang sure don't prepare them psychologically. Black parents do not teach their children to embrace and value being black. Now, this is where I'm going to have a bunch of people in my comment section claiming that they do. Stop it. Just stop it. You're not fooling anyone. This pathetic practice of denying our failures, this is something that the black baby boomers did, and the only thing that you're showing is that you're cut from the same cloth as them. If we as black people truly had all of these black parents who are indoctrinating their children with a sense of black empowerment, then we wouldn't have all of this epidemic of off-code behavior that we've been cursed with. The failure begins in the home, because that's the one place where black people should at least have enough sense to try to exercise control over. Most black parents, and this includes a large number of you listening, are trying to be part-time custodians of your kids. Or you're trying to parent by remote control. You're trying to parent as little as possible. The African shirked his responsibility at the continental level, and you have now shirked your responsibility at the individual level. Because you know as well as I do, there is no amount of white media, TV shows, movies, video games, or phony news propaganda that can undo the teachings of a dedicated black parent. You got a black parent who's made up his or her mind that their child must understand the world that they're in and understand that that child must have power so that that child can exercise that power to reinstitute justice. There is no amount of white media propaganda that's going to overcome that. You got some black folks who want to outsource this basic parental duty. Even the black media is not supposed to be doing that for you. That's supposed to be what you're doing for yourself. If a black media never existed, that would still not absolve you of the responsibility to have to teach your children that they have a right to influence the world and a right to be free from any sort of oppression or degradation. They have a right to have power. They have a right to shape the world. In fact, they have a duty to shape the world. Every black person is to realize that they are not an island unto themselves. When it comes to dealings among other black people, be it our direct family members or the black collective, then you can start talking that friendship stuff. It does have its place in the black collective, though even friendship stops at the cash register. And that's because culture is completely reliant upon and largely shaped by resources. And a group of people who don't have resources, they're not going to have a culture or friends either. But beyond that, when it comes to dealings with those outside the black community, we must realize and act like we understand that we are part of a group. And groups don't have friends. Groups have interests. And dealings outside the black collective must be seen from and participated in from that perspective. Now you got some Negroes who are trying to act like they're a group of one, and what happens predictably is these other groups that you're trying to be a group of one with, they make it very clear to you, nah, we might tolerate your presence, but that's about the most you're going to get from us. And before long, they go to being a loyal lapdog because they know that's the best they're going to get. These other groups make it crystal clear that they're not going to do business with you to any extent. Oh, well, surely I can be one of you, right? Well, you might be the team mascot, though you're going to be a mascot that gets kicked around a lot, but that's going to be the best you can hope for. and you go making too much noise about that, well, guess who's going to be put out for the night or permanently? Too many black people have taken up practicing codependency. And this is why the zaddy worship and Becky fetishes are so out of control. You look at the oppressor class as being soulmates, and they look at you as being gutter sexual recreation at best. Black children must be taught to value interacting with other black children in a constructive manner. That begins in the home. The white media will devalue melanin every chance it gets. Either it uses image training to associate blackness with every undesirable trait imaginable, or it degrades blackness into being, at best, a helper to white power. This is why the only representations of black people the white media will allow is either the pathological criminal or the sidekick slash best friend. This is meant to indoctrinate black people, especially black children, that if you're not trying to make yourself useful to some white person and carrying out their wishes, then you're a threat. You're one or the other. The white media goes out of their way to make it clear that black men are not to be shown as administrators. They're not to be shown as the ones who are running things, and they certainly do not give orders to non black people. No, a black man is not in charge of anything unless it's a drug operation. The white media doesn't show black people interacting with one another for the sake of benefiting other black people. They want to teach you that, oh, black folks just can't get it together. And some of you have hid behind that lie. Oh, there are examples of black people who do indeed manage to work for the good of the collective. But the problem is you got a lot of black folks who are desperate not to be part of that. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. They're turning around to the burning city. As far as they're concerned, the responsibilities of black empowerment, well, that's too inconvenient. It's not desirable enough. The white media has come up with a number of templates, and it's deliberate templates that are meant to reinforce black dysfunction. Black children watch these white media generated lies. The white media tells them that this is a colorblind society, so it's okay for you to be someone's sidekick. But as soon as the black child decides that his white pals should follow his instructions, all of a sudden the society puts him in his place real quick. They show him, ain't no colorblind anything. Well, what does colorblind mean under the white media? What colorblind means is the dominant society will not remind you that you're black until you try to exercise power. That's what colorblind means. We'll go ahead and we're not going to call you a nigger to your face. And why? When we're in front of you, we'll tell you that we're all just people. That is, until you call yourself trying to call any shots. Then all of a sudden, hey, nigger, you black people sure are uppity, you know. And all of a sudden they'll remind you, oh, we see what color you are. Black people are not shown or depicted as ever working together for a constructive enterprise. The only time the white media shows two or more black people working together on anything, it's to do drugs or carry out some sort of criminal action. And predictably, the black child grows up and enters the world with this dysfunctional view of themselves. So when it's time to build something, he doesn't even attempt to go to other black people. Instead, he immediately runs to try to hitch his wagon to the star of the dominant society. Whoever the nearest white person is, that's who he's going to go running to. It never even occurs to him, you might want to cast down your buckets where you stand. Maybe the people around you are the ones who you need to be whipping into shape so you can change some of these things. And that brings us to another issue. Trying to build with other black people instead of making excuses for why you can't. Because when it comes to black folks, why we can be abused and we can be roadblocked and stymied and crippled 5 ways from Sunday by the white supremacists, and yet we will still try to be part of their operation. Oh, there's no amount of abuse that's too much for us when it comes to trying to be part of the dominant society's operation. We'll go ahead and put up with any amount of abuse from them. See, when it comes to dealing with the white supremacists, black people have infinite patience with them. Why, we'll see the white supremacists crush our dreams over and over again with their refusals to support anything that we try to do. Why, we'll even let them send us to prison, and we will still cling to that rotted corpse of some colorblind delusion. Meanwhile, when it comes to other black people, well, we've got absolutely no patience and no faith with them at all. Oh, we got infinite patience with the white supremacists, but other black people, nah, not even a microsecond. Oh, well, how about if we try to put some effort into building something? Yes, you're going to bump your head every once in a while, but why not put some effort behind that? Oh, that's too much. That takes too long, too painful. I ain't doing that. You got these black people who have taken on the mentality of the dominant society, even if they're not honest enough with themselves to admit to it. Oh, these people will immediately claim that there's absolutely no black people that they can build with, though they're always very careful not to mention that they haven't even tried. Or they'll dismiss cooperating with black people with the flimsy, feeble excuse that it's simply too difficult for some reason or another. Now, ask yourself this question: would there be a black media today if the thought leaders of the black media had taken that attitude? Oh, yeah, you'll endure any amount of abuse from the white supremacists. Black folks will fight wars to try to force the white supremacists to accept us. Why, we'll go to your lunch counters. You can beat us up until we're bloody. You can firebomb us. You can murder us in the streets. Can I please go to your movie theater? Well, not until they kill about 10 or 20 more of you. Apparently, that's the price of admission to this movie theater. Why, there's no mountain that we won't climb. There's absolutely no river of glass that we won't crawl naked across, no level of degradation that we won't stoop to in order to win the favor of the bad guys. Why, we'll browbeat the white supremacists and we'll make these feeble pleas that they recognize our humanity if they'll just let us hang around. But the moment that you tell him that he should apply that same indomitable spirit to trying to get black people to toe the line, all of a sudden he tells you it would be too hard, it'd take too much effort, it ain't worth it. Some folks just never learn. White supremacy has no permanent plans for any black person. Other groups seem to recognize this fact. You got these people who come from these non-white countries but are seeking to try to find a comfortable place under white supremacy. When they get here, what they decide is, hey, there may not be anybody who looks like me here yet, but I'm going to establish an enclave here. I am the forward element of what's going to be this community here soon. Oh, sure, I'll be doing business with these other non-Asians or non-Hispanic folks until I get my weight up. And once I get my weight up, I'm going to be making sure that I'm smoothing the runway for the others who are going to be coming behind me. That's the mentality that they carry into it. They're not trying to figure out how to abandon their group. They're trying to figure out how to establish their group. They'll do as much business with the dominant society or even with black folks as they have to, and be very careful not to let black people, or in many cases the white supremacists, get control of what they're trying to build. But as soon as they're able, they start using their position to put their own people on. You got these people from the Middle East who own these gasoline stations. The most you're going to be is either you're going to be sweeping the floors or you're going to be working a cash register because he doesn't have enough in-laws or relatives who are willing to work for those wages to do so. But don't think that he's going to be handing the keys to the shop over to you unless he's telling you make sure you close up tonight. That's the closest to getting the keys you're ever going to have. This becomes a tad confusing for some black folks because they're deliberately looking for excuses to hide behind. A lot of black people pretend not to understand what it is we mean by building an economy. When it's explained to them, they then try to hide behind, well, what if you can't find any black people to build with? I get amused at the half-wits who tried the stupid, feeble line of, well, if a company's got mostly black folks who work there, just because it's got a white CEO and a white board and white administrators, that don't mean it ain't a black company. I mean, there's mostly black folks there. That makes it a black company, right? This is the epitome of desperate and stupid, the kind of mentality that tries something like that. And you would think that in this place, the house that Professor Truth built, you would think that in the confines of the black media, that you wouldn't have individuals trying that old lame feeble excuse. What if I can't find nobody to build with? You would think they would have better sense than to try that here. And yet there are a number of them who try it. And why is that? Well, it would make sense if it's World Star Hip Hop or Hood Clips or some other place on YouTube, but they try that with a black medium. Why would they try that here? It's because they're hearing a different message here. There are a lot of black people who are hell bound and determined that they'll be damned before they take on the duties and responsibilities that power requires. Black empowerment, they have had a black media that has unapologetically spelled out exactly what the requirements of power are, and they have looked and decided, well, the rigors of power, that's requiring too much. I'm trying to sit back and just coast. I'm not trying to do well. Yeah, that's too much work, too much trouble. So they're trying to find an excuse that sounds good. Well, I'm sure if I find an excuse that'll sound good, well, that might fly with other people, but it's not going to fly here. That's what's going on here, and it's obvious what the hell it is that they're doing. There are a lot of black people who have decided that they're not going to build. They don't want to be part of black empowerment. They don't want to have to take on the adult responsibilities that power requires, and they're trying to find an excuse they can use that will get someone to say it's okay. They're trying to find some way to harangue and harass and to otherwise get some phony sympathy and say, well, I can't do it. And they want us to say, that's okay, you don't have to. Oh, you don't want to have to actually build. Well, somebody else will see to your survival. You don't have to see to it for yourself. That's okay. You get an exception. See, that's what one of the things the white supremacy also gave them. White supremacy will throw you some crumbs if, as long as you go ahead and give them some story, though the crumbs are being withdrawn these days. And now they're coming to the black enclave, and hopefully they can try the same thing here. Won't work. For those Negroes out there who are trying to find excuses instead of find power, let me tell you something. Black empowerment is not about to be throwing you any crumbs because you're not a dog. You're a man, and you will be required to stand on your feet as such. And if you're one of these people still trying to find some excuse to hide behind, I'll tell you right now, Professor Black Truth, I'll see your stomach touch your backbone before I see you get any crumbs from me. You're not going to be playing this game of let me find an excuse. I'm looking for people who are out there finding ways to get things done, not the ones giving the same old shop-worn, time-honored bullcrap lies and excuses for why they can't. I don't respect can't. And you shouldn't either. And no, it is not okay for any black person to be disempowered. It's not okay for any black person to be oppressed. And it's not okay for any black person to be without or to try to find a way to say, well, here's the reason why I can't. It's not okay. And if you're playing the game of, well, if I can't find no black folks to build with, fine, then that's not a requirement. You got some Chinese nationals trying to get a foothold in Africa, and the Chinese government gives them some money with which to start an import company. 90% of the employees for that company are going to be black, but you better believe the 5 or 6 Chinese who run things, they're going to be the only non-blacks in the entire company, and they're fine with that. You want to know why? Because they know that that's not a black company. What defines whether a company is black or not? The same thing that defines every other business enterprise. The person or people who own it. You see, those export companies that the Chinese are setting up, they'll have a 90% black workforce, and yet for some strange reason, we all understand those are not African companies. Those are not black companies. Why? Companies defined by who owns it. Now, we can quibble about whether it operates in black people's interests, but what we don't get to quibble about is what defines the company as being black owned or not. What defines it as a black company, that we don't get to argue about. That's why we don't waste time with these do-nothings. You can tell them to build with black people and they'll claim they can't find any black people. You tell them, okay, fine then, build your business with whomever you have there in front of you, be they as employees or customers or what have you, so long as you retain 100% control. And as soon as you give them that, that ought to put the excuses to an end. But even then, they claim not to know. Well, doesn't that mean it's not a black business anymore? So what you see is they're just trying to find excuses to hide behind. These are not legitimate questions. These happen to be backstabbers and backsliders who are making complaints and objections, but they're trying to give their objections in the form of questions. They're looking for an excuse not to do anything. And when you explain to them that you can do business with whomever you must, as long as you understand that whatever economic means you amass is to serve black people, they fall silent at that point. But it's not because they understand, they've always understood. The reason that they'll fall silent is because they can't think of another excuse. You've taken the excuses away. It's obvious where these objections come from. These are the Negroes who are terrified at the prospect of having to get off their duffs and produce for themselves. You never see the white supremacists or Asian people who own these fast food restaurants or dollar stores asking where they're supposed to find Asians and white people to build with. They will have a mostly, if not completely, black workforce and customer base, and yet for some strange reason, that doesn't become an excuse for them. And yet the money that they generate never touches the very black community who made it possible in the first place. See, all these excuse making Negroes, they pick that crap up from white supremacy. And as Neely Fuller said, the white supremacists like to play dumb, and black folks like to play dumb right along with them. Only this time you got these black folks trying that ploy with the black media, and we won't play along with it. We don't allow the white supremacists to act like they don't know what's going on, and we won't allow you to do so either. So these Negroes who are out here talking about how they can't find other black people to build with, they're not fooling anyone, and they're not going to take anyone anywhere. Is it easy to find on code black people? No, but it's hardly impossible. Most black people are waiting to see who has a machine in place that they can follow. Why not yours? Black children need to be taught that their survival will depend entirely on whether or not they build. And please don't tell me you're already teaching black children this, because if you were, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. Black children need to be taught to take pride in being black. Blackness is not something to be avoided or run away from or ignored. But that's what too many of us have tried to do. The hand-picked Negroes who white supremacy cherry picks to pretend to be our leaders, these actors, athletes, and celebrities, they get a little bit of money and then they try to become part of the dominant society. And they try to then justify this denial by repeating the same old platitudes about post-racial this and colorblind that, pious sounding lies, because the very dominant society they're so eager to get close to does not practice any of that. But more than that, black empowerment must once again become our standard operating procedure. Too many of us are rebelling against this reality, and we are allowing our children to be mistaught to rebel against it as well, and that's not okay. You do not have the right to refuse to teach your children the reality of the world that they live in. But for those of you out there who have given yourselves some feel-good lie excuses as to why it's okay for you not to do your duty as black parents, let me tell you something. You can go ahead and decide that it's just too much trouble for you to have to daily hammer into your black children's minds the realities of the world and what they must do, the task before them. You don't have to teach your black children that. That's okay. Go ahead and create a void in their minds, and the white media will fill the void that you left with all kinds of colorblind kumbaya nonsense, and then your black child can go ahead and become a casualty of the white supremacist social order. But that doesn't fall on them, that falls on you. You better learn to stop investing in these white media sophisticated lies calling themselves entertainment. It's not entertainment at all. Because the reality is, it's not the white media that's doing the entertaining, it's you. You're the one who is doing the entertaining. And by consuming the white media's anti-black propaganda and allowing your children to do the same, what you're entertaining is genocide.
This Sunday, reopening America.
Americans are looking forward to the safe and rapid reopening of our country.
President Trump ending the social distancing guidelines.
They'll be fading out because now the governors are doing it.
Americans desperate to get back to work.
Nobody's made any money for 2 months, so they need to get in here and make money.
But many are urging caution.
And hopefully everyone does it according to the guidelines for opening America again.
When we take a step forward, we don't want to take 2 steps back.
My guest this morning, Dr. Tom Inglesby of Johns Hopkins University, and health directors from 2 states taking different approaches to reopen. Plus, new hope for a COVID-19 treatment.
The data shows that remdesivir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery.
How long until we have a treatment or a vaccine? I'll talk to Sir John Bell from Oxford University, where a promising vaccine study is well underway. Also, declaring victory.
I think when you ask, how did we do? I think we did a spectacular job.
With more than 60,000 dead and 30 million out of work, is the Trump administration risking its own mission accomplished moment? And pole vault. Joe Biden takes the lead in battleground states, but now calls are growing for a fuller investigation of charges by his accuser, Tara Reid. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, former Congressional Budget Director Douglas Holt-Eakin, infectious disease physician Dr. Nagid Bedalia, and Amy Walter, national editor for the Cook Political Report. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press and our continuing coverage of the coronavirus pandemic.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. It was on January 6th that the CDC first issued a travel notice for Wuhan, China. Consider what has happened in less than 4 months' time. More than 1.1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 have been diagnosed in the U.S., and more than 66,000 Americans have died. The American economy shrunk by nearly 5% in the first quarter, with the worst yet to come. And some 30 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits just in the past 6 weeks. Those are the sobering numbers. But this has not been like other crises. Think 9/11, Oklahoma City, even the Challenger accident. Instead of being united in grief, much of America is divided by politics. We see it in the anti-social distancing protests in states extending stay-at-home guidelines. We see it in a Gallup poll that finds 44% of Republicans would be willing to return to normal activities right now if there were no restrictions at all, while only 4% of Democrats say the exact same thing. We see it in Vice President Pence not wearing a face mask at the Mayo Clinic, where it's the rule. We can even see it in the Wall Street Journal report that the Trump campaign has ordered red Trump-branded face masks for supporters. It all prompted this statement yesterday from former President George W. Bush. In the final analysis, we are not partisan combatants. We are human beings, equally vulnerable and equally wonderful to the side of God. Of course, there have been countless acts of kindness, generosity, and heroism, especially from our healthcare workers. But much of that good news is obscured by the intensifying and often partisan debate over when and how to reopen this country.
Going to open safely and quickly, I hope, because we have to get our country back.
The president is pressing states to end stay-at-home orders. And by tomorrow, 33 states will have begun the process of at least partial reopening after federal social distancing guidelines expired on Thursday.
Mother's Day is coming up. Your mama told you to wash your hands and cover your nose and mouth as you cough. As long as we do those simple things and use common sense, we ought to be just fine.
They did misleading pictures acting like, this was like Lollapalooza on the beach or something like that. Has there been some type of major outbreak? No.
But in Michigan, where armed demonstrators stormed the Capitol this week,
swastikas and Confederate flags, nooses, and automatic rifles do not represent who we are as Michiganders. Nothing that I want more than to just flip the switch and return to normal. But that's not how it's going to work, unfortunately.
On Tuesday, the president promised to meet the testing benchmark set by a Harvard study.
You're saying you're confident you can surpass 5 million tests per day? Is that?
Oh, well, we're going to be there very soon.
On Wednesday, he walked that back.
I didn't say it, but somebody came out with a report saying 5 million. I think that was from the Harvard report. But We are going to be there at a certain point.
Even so, the president and his political aides are trying to recast the federal response to the pandemic as a success story.
We did all the right moves. I think we did a spectacular job, and we have saved thousands and thousands of lives. I can even make that, if you want, hundreds of thousands of lives.
The government, federal government, rose to the challenge, and this is a great success story.
The language is nothing new. For months, as the death toll has risen, the president has declared in some form or another, mission accomplished.
When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. As we near the end of our historic battle with the invisible enemy, we can begin the next front in our war, which we're calling opening up America again.
Back in late February, you predicted that the number of cases would go down to zero. How did we get from your prediction of 0 to 1 million?
Well, it will go down to zero ultimately.
The president's own public health experts warn against reopening too quickly.
You can't just leap over things and get into a situation where you're really tempting a rebound.
But perhaps motivated by the political calendar, the White House is presenting a rosier timeline.
Early summer, we could be in a much better place as a nation.
May is the transition month, May and June probably. By June, a lot of the country should be back to normal.
And joining me now is Dr. Tom Inglesby. He's the director at the Center for Health Security of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Inglesby, welcome to Meet the Press. And let me just start with a simple question. 33 states are doing this. We noted that 18 states have hit their one-day case total high of those 33 in the last 2 weeks. So technically not meeting those phase 1 metrics. Are we ready to be doing this as a country?
I think we need to be going forward very cautiously. I think if you look at the overall country numbers, we're about 200,000 new cases a week at this point. And in the last month, we've had something on the order of 60,000 deaths. So most of the illness and death has occurred over the last 30 days. So overall, as a country, we still have a long way to go. But the states are in very different places, and some states, a small minority of states, are beginning to get closer to the White House metrics of 2 weeks decline. And so in those places, if they have other capabilities in place, if they're able to really rapidly isolate and trace the contacts of patients with COVID, if they're able to diagnose very widely everybody who's got symptoms of COVID, not just the sick people, but everybody, then those states would be the places where it would be least risky to go ahead and begin to reopen.
Do we not have the testing capacity right now to give the states the security they have of making these decisions? How much is this somewhat guesswork because of our lack of surveillance capabilities when it comes to where the virus is in many of these places?
Yeah, I think there still is a lot of uncertainty, but there is a range of diagnostic testing capability across the country, and you can tell that in the percent of persons who are positive. In some states, they're testing so many people that the percent of people who are positive is very low, and that's a good number. In other places, the percent of people testing is very high, and that's worrisome. So it depends on where you are in the country in terms of access to testing, the operations around testing, and it's like a patchwork across the country.
Is there a way, when are you going to know whether this is a mistake or not? Is it basically waiting the next 2 to 4 weeks in these incubation periods?
Yeah, for this disease, it's going to take about 2 to 3 weeks for us to begin to see trends that come out of the changes in social distancing. So a measure taken this morning, you probably won't see a change in hospitalization rates or ICU capacity until 2 or 3 weeks from now. So that's the nature of the disease. It's going to take a little time for things to get into the system.
What is something that these state health officials don't have access to data-wise that you wish they did before making these decisions?
I think we should, in the coming weeks and months, we need to get a much better handle on the number of mild and moderate cases of disease that we have. The good news is that many people do not get seriously ill with this disease. But the bad news is that we're not capturing those people in terms of numbers for the country. And if we don't know who they are, then we can't break their chains of transmission. We can't isolate them. We can't quarantine their contacts. So we need to know much more about the mild and moderate illnesses around the country, and that will come with more diagnostic testing.
I want to ask you something that somebody wrote about the CDC. It was, I think, a colleague of yours at Johns Hopkins, or no, excuse me, Dr. Jahaz at Harvard. But it was sort of the odd lacking of missing data that the CDC normally tracks. He said, normally, if you wanted to find out how many people had tuberculosis in this country in the last year, ask the CDC. Want to know about health care associated infections? Ask the CDC. But ask how many COVID-19 tests have been done, and the CDC doesn't have an answer. Want a daily update on how many people are getting hospitalized for COVID-19? The CDC isn't tracking it. Want to know if social distancing is making a difference? The CDC doesn't know. What is going on here? Are we missing a huge component of our public health response?
I think we do need more data. Clearly, I certainly agree with the need for the data that Dr. Jha outlined there. I think that we're tracking this epidemic in a different way than we've tracked others. We haven't had this urgent need to understand hospitalizations on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis as we've had for some of the other things we've confronted before. And we need to get better as a country. We need to get our, like, if you look at state health department data right now, some states are not reporting their hospitalization data. We live in a federal system. If they're not reporting it at the state level, it's hard for CDC to get that data in real time. So I think we all need to collectively get better. Some states have more data available than others, but we should all be rising.
Let's get a realistic timeline. Next 3 months, next 6 months. A lot of people are concerned about the fall. How concerned are you? And is there any way of avoiding a bad fall outcome at this point without either advancements in a treatment or a vaccine?
Well, before we even get to the fall, I am worried that we will have small waves in various places around the country for the coming months. Hopefully we won't, but as we begin to ease social distancing in various places in the country, this virus is highly transmissible. Nothing has changed in the underlying dynamics of this virus. If we stop social distancing altogether tomorrow, we would recreate the conditions that existed in the country in February, March. So what we need to do is continue to our best possible effort, all the individual efforts we're making around social distancing, staying 6 feet apart, wearing masks when in public, avoiding large gatherings. But the extent to which we're able to do that over the next couple of months will dictate how we do as states and as a country. Ultimately, in the fall, we have an additional challenge. We have influenza that will reappear. The flu season will start. And at that point, COVID will be mixed with flu and will both be contributing to hospitalizations and ICU beds. And so we're going to have two concurrent large public health challenges at the same time. So I am worried about the uptake in the hospitalization rate and the more people needing intensive care in the fall. But I don't think people should think that there will be a lull, that just because summer's coming, we're going to have a lull before the fall. It would be wonderful if that happens, but I don't think we should at all assume that at this point, given the nature of this virus.
And I'm going to leave it there because I think that's the single most important takeaway viewers need to have. Don't call it a lull. It is unlikely we're going to have a lull in the summer. Anyway, Dr. Ingleby from Johns Hopkins University, thanks for starting us off with your expertise on this. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
And joining me now are two state officials central to making decisions about whether, when, and how their state should reopen. Dr. Scott Harris, he's the state health officer for the Alabama Department of Public Health, and Dr. Janae Khaldun, Chief Deputy Director for Health for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you both for joining. And so I want to start with you, Dr. Harris, since Alabama's doing a little more opening right now than Michigan, although you're, compared to some of your southern neighbors, I would argue you guys are being a bit more cautious than others. But tell me the metrics you used that gave you and the confidence to advise the governor at beginning some phased-in reopening.
Sure. So we have followed a number of metrics, like I think most states have, including the White House plan for reopening. The gating criteria that I'm sure you talked about many times on this show were were certainly part of the things that we considered. We have not fully satisfied all of those gating criteria in terms of cases per day, but we felt very good about our syndromic surveillance numbers. We felt very good about our hospital capacity. And so what our governor chose to do was to make a very measured step, a very gradual reopening of certain types of businesses. We did not proceed to a full phase one reopening like was in the White House plan. Things like entertainment venues and in-person dining, we have not chosen to do that so far. But we think this is just a gradual first step.
What data are you missing, Dr. Harris, that you wish you had, but you just, whether it's capacity or other reasons you don't have?
Yeah, there are a number of things. I think clearly we would like to make sure we're testing to the level that we would like. We probably have a total amount of laboratory bench capacity to do the number of tests that we would like to do. But those tests are really unevenly distributed throughout the state. If you're in a bigger, more urbanized part of our state, like Jefferson County, where Birmingham is located, or Madison County, where Huntsville is located, you can probably have really good access to testing whenever you like. But in some of our more rural parts of the state, we are able to get testing done, but there are definitely barriers there for people to obtain that, particularly if they have to find transportation or they don't have ready access to a healthcare provider. And we've also been surprised to find that we have not necessarily gotten negative test results reported to us. It's hard to come up with a good denominator so that we know the percent positive of tests we have. And so we have reached out to all the labs who report to us, but many of them are out of state, and it's just difficult to get all that information.
Dr. Caldoun, let me ask the question sort of a slightly different. What are you seeing in your state that makes you uncomfortable advising the governor to begin even a partial phase one reopening?
Yeah, so here in the state of Michigan, we have over 43,000 cases and over 4,000 deaths. And so we are actually third in the country when it comes to states and the number of deaths. While we've seen certainly significant improvements over the past several weeks, our hospitals were over capacity, particularly in the southeast area of the state several weeks ago. We are still having parts of the state that are seeing an increase in the rate of rise of cases. And we know that their hospital capacity is not what it should be. We have to get our testing up, as I know people across the country are working on. So while we are cautiously optimistic, we still think we need to be very careful.
All right, but Dr. Caldoun, what do you say to those in the state who are going, you know what? Yes, Southeast Michigan is being hit hard. Are you not comfortable having sort of a let's isolate parts of the state, tougher stay-at-home measures for Southeast Michigan, let's loosen things up in more rural parts of the state? Why are you not there yet?
So we actually look at this data on a daily basis regionally. And so, again, we are still seeing, for example, on the western side of the state, that there are actually increases in the rate of rise of cases. We have several outbreaks there. We also know, again, in some of our rural areas, the number of hospital beds is actually not what it should be. And many of our hospitals in our rural areas are actually at capacity. So every part of the state is different. Even in Southeast, quite frankly, even though we're seeing a decrease in the rate of rise, we're still seeing many, many cases and many deaths every day. So we're going to be working on loosening or dialing up as far as how we're reopening the economy. The governor has actually already started that. So we really have to do it in an incremental, data-driven approach.
I imagine both of you are feeling pressure, whether it's pressure from friends and family tired of the quarantine, pressure from friends of yours who maybe run businesses, or full-on political pressure. Dr. Caldoun, let me start with you. How have you handled it? And if you've been getting, how have you handled the public blowback? And how do you strike that balance in your own head where you feel like you're giving full-on medical advice versus, let me give you the best medical advice I can for the policy you want to implement?
So, you know, this is certainly not personal. People hire me to give medical and public health advice, and that is what I do. I talk to the governor and other folks in the governor's office on a regular basis to tell them the facts. These are the number of tests that we are currently doing. This is where we want to be. This is what's going on with our hospitals. And again, if we don't do well with these social distancing measures, more people will die, and that is just the facts.
Dr. Harris, how much have you felt that pressure?
I mean, obviously, it's significant, as you know. I mean, there are, many Alabamians that just don't have the option of making a living, under certain health orders. We have to find a way to strike the right balance there. I think our Governor Abbey, has done a great job of trying to balance the health of the economy with the health of average Alabamians. My job in public health is to give her the best health information I can. We present the data on how, just as Dr. Calhoun said, on how many cases we have and what our deaths look like. I think Alabama has been a little bit different. Every state's different, and there's 51 different plans for reopening. I guess because we're all trying to look at the data and make our own decisions. With the best information that we have about how to proceed. But there are people who are certainly want to maintain their livelihoods. They want to maintain their businesses, and we have to balance that with keeping everyone safe and healthy as much as possible.
Dr. Harris, are you concerned that Georgia has been more aggressive? And, for instance, Senator Doug Jones in Alabama has encouraged Alabamians to be careful traveling to Georgia.
Well, it's obviously we look at that very closely. There's certainly some good aspects about having, every state having its own plan because every state is a little bit different. But clearly, all states affect the others, and so we're watching that very carefully. What we've done in Alabama, I think, is again have this sort of measured approach, and I think what I've heard many states say, and what our governor has certainly said, is that these aren't steps forward that are just going to ratchet forward and can never come back. These are gradual steps, and we certainly, will consider dialing things back if we see an increase in cases. And so I think that's the approach that probably all states would want to take. We see where we are after changes are made and then make changes if necessary.
Dr. Calhoun in Michigan, Dr. Harris in Alabama, thank you both for sharing your expertise in the sort of the regional observations that you both both can share with the country. Good luck to you. Stay healthy out there. When we come back, the race for a coronavirus vaccine. I'm going to talk to a professor of medicine at Oxford University in the UK, where they've gotten a head start in testing a vaccine that they believe is showing real promise. That is next. Welcome back. The race for a coronavirus vaccine is on, and nowhere is there more optimism or perhaps progress than at Oxford University. They're testing a vaccine that has shown success in rhesus monkeys. What's more, they're ahead of competitors because earlier testing of the vaccine for other viruses has shown it to be safe in people, so human testing can begin much sooner. And joining me now is Sir John Bell. He's the Regius Professor of Medicine at Oxford University, and he's going to tell us more about this. Welcome to Meet the Press, Sir Bell. Let me just start with this question. One of your colleagues used the percentage of 80% chance that this vaccine is at least somewhat successful in the next year. Are you that optimistic, and are you at all concerned our optimism around the world for what you guys are doing has gotten a bit over exuberant?
Yeah, so I obviously people who have dedicated their careers to this kind of a problem have a tendency to get excited about the prospects because the prospects are pretty good. I certainly wouldn't put the possibility at 80%. That's a pretty big number. But we're gradually reeling it in bit by bit, and as every day goes by, the likelihood of success goes up.
You're in the midst of, you want to start some human trials. One of your potential hurdles is the lack of outbreaks, right? In order to do this, you need to try your next set of trials. Where do you know when you're going to be able to do this, and where are you looking? Are you looking at places like India? Where are you looking to do these trials?
So we've still got lots of disease in the UK. We probably have something in the order of 15 or 20,000 transmissions a day in the UK. So there's no shortage of disease here. And we'll push. We've already started clinical trials. So we've already given the vaccine to about 1,000 people. And we're going to grow that pretty rapidly. We've consolidated the phase 1 and 2 programs because we are pretty confident that the vector itself is safe because it's been used in about 5,000 people already up to now. So that's allowed us to really accelerate the phase 1 program. And we hope that there would be enough disease that we would get evidence that the vaccine has efficacy by the beginning of June.
What's the likelihood that if this fails as a vaccine, there will be something that is usable as a therapeutic? And I'm just wondering, and then in the reverse, as we hear good news about, for instance, remdesivir, on its ability as a therapeutic, how helpful is that in the development of the vaccine?
So probably it's helpful for sure. It's probably not helpful in the development of the vaccine. I don't think it works by a completely different mechanism. It works on the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is a completely different replication mechanism of the virus. So we're stimulating the immune response to the virus, which is at the other end of the therapeutic options that we've got. So the two are probably not connected, but both could be helpful steps to trying to get the virus under control.
There's been some concern that you guys are going too fast. That, and it's not just you; it's all of the labs that are attempting to get a vaccine. That there's such pressure coming from national governments that some safety protocols will be overlooked. I'm sure you like others are claiming you're meeting all those protocols, but there has to be some concern that the pressure is going to create gaps on this. What are you doing to try to prevent that?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's a big issue for us is trying to be sure that we do this quickly, but we don't miss out any of the key safety steps. I think we've got reason to believe that the efficacy of the vaccine in terms of generating strong antibody responses is probably going to be okay. The real question is whether the safety profile is going to be fine. So that's actually the main focus of the clinical studies. We did all the preclinical work you would expect anybody to do. And in fact, although some companies have left out, for example, primate studies, they haven't done as many preclinical studies as we have. We did all of them. We did mouse, ferret, primate. We wanted to get a good read on what's going on. And now we're being very careful in the clinic to try and monitor exactly what's happening. But, that doesn't mean there won't be safety signals, because there may well be, and we'll be on the alert to see if we can see them.
When is the next time you will find out if this is not going to work? There's these different moments where you'll find out, oh, we can go to a next step. When will you know if this isn't going to be a successful vaccine effort?
Yeah, so I think there'll be primate data released this week. That'll be an important milestone. And then we'll have to wait until there's enough incident disease in the phase 2 cohort, which has been vaccinated now, to see whether we have largely eliminated the disease in those vaccinated with this vaccine as opposed to the placebo. And that's really the test. And that's what we'll probably get a signal based on current levels of the disease. We'll probably get a signal in early June. We're ready to move trials overseas if the disease peters out in the UK. So we've got sites already in play in other bits of the world where it's active. So we're pretty sure we'll get a signal by June about whether this works or not.
And finally, do you have a sense if this will be a one-time vaccine or something closer to the flu where perhaps we have to have a different vaccine due to a mutation every year?
Yeah, so coronavirus doesn't mutate at the pace of flu as far as we can see, but it's also quite a tricky virus in terms of generating long-standing immune responses to it. And as a result, I suspect we may need to have relatively regular vaccinations against coronaviruses going into the future. That of course remains to be seen, but that's my bet at the moment, is that this is likely to be a seasonal coronavirus vaccine.
Sir John Bell at Oxford, the whole world's rooting for you. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views with us.
Thank you very much. Take care.
When we come back, finding a vaccine is one thing. Fixing our economy is another gargantuan challenge. The panel is next. And as we go to break, look up in the sky. It's the Navy's Blue Angels and the Air Force's Thunderbirds flying around the country in honor of the nation's healthcare workers. Welcome back. The panel is with us from their remote locations